the Good Mike Works pay-per-view and DVD reviews volume 16. Haven't come up and done one of these in a couple of months, so I figured I was way overdue. Plus, in the spirit of Survivor Series, I wanted to do a couple of reviews Survivor Series related. And given the fact that Seth Rollins, WWE Champion, sustained a devastating injury and had to forfeit the WWE title, forcing WWE to have a 16-man tournament to determine the new WWE champion, with the finals to take place at Survivor Series, I thought a very appropriate Survivor Series would be the one from 1998, Deadly Game, the 16-man tournament. Now, unlike the one that we're currently watching right now, this one took place, the entire tournament took place on the pay-per-view. Where in this case, the one that we're watching that will culminate at Survivor Series 2015 is probably only going to be the last couple of matches. Everything else is taking place on Raw and SmackDown. But given the fact that it is a 16-man tournament and it is for the WWE title and it will be taking place, some of it, at Survivor Series, Deadly Game seemed like a hands-down, no-brainer to do. We're going to review this great pay-per-view from 1998. For those of you just joining us for the first time, go to my website, GoodMikeWorkCommentaries.com, where you can watch this YouTube video and download any of my previous episodes completely for free. You can find me on iTunes and Stitcher Radio, and of course, follow me on the social media networks, Facebook and Twitter specifically. Links to all this shit is in the description below. Welcome aboard, and let's start talking about Survivor Series 1998 Deadly Game. I have to give this pay-per-view a solid A. I remember this vividly, watching it live. I ordered the pay-per-view. As a matter of fact, when I was re-watching it, taking down notes, I was watching the actual live pay-per-view broadcast, complete without all the edits and the bullshit and the pre-show and Sunday Night Heat and all that stuff. So I watched the entire thing, kind of refreshed my memory on this pay-per-view, and it brought back memories. I remember where I was living. I remember the apartment that I had. I remember the friends that I had over. I remember the beer I was drinking that night. This was a really great pay-per-view full of twists and turns, and it just goes to show you how much fun the WWE used to have with things. In my last commentary, where I reviewed the United Kingdom Raw from November 9th, 2015, I talked about this 16-man tournament and how the WWE really has an opportunity to do some fun shit here and surprise us and swerve us and all of that. And I just had this sickening suspicion that they might not do it and just go the easy route and not give us anything exciting at all. Well, this pay-per-view definitely gave us twist after twist, turn after turn. They swerved us more than once. We had 2 heel turns, and there was a lot of surprises on this show. All in all, I think really well done, and it just goes to show you how the WWE, they were just going balls to the wall. Everything was working, everything was clicking, and this pay-per-view and this tournament and all of the storylines and swerves were pulled off perfectly. Now, just to set the stage for you, the whole reason they had a vacant WWE title back in these days to begin with is because Vince McMahon, of course, was locked in his heated feud with Stone Cold Steve Austin. He had tried ever since WrestleMania 14 to get the belt off of Austin and only really was successful one time when Kane won it for one night. Then he books Austin, I believe, at Breakdown. That would have been the September pay-per-view of that year. Books him in a handicap match, or I don't know, a triple threat match, against Undertaker and Kane. And Undertaker and Kane basically worked together to dismantle Stone Cold, and then they pinned him simultaneously, ending his WWE title reign, but leaving it really up in the air as who the WWE champion is. And if you remember, this was back when Austin had the smoking skull belt, and this is the pay-per-view where Vince McMahon, after the match, grabbed the belt and ran to the back and got in his limousine and then flipped Austin the bird as the pay-per-view went off the air, and that classic picture of Vince and that evil face and that fucking middle finger. It was great shit. And then at the next pay-per-view, pretty sure that was Judgment Day, they had Austin as the special referee to ref the match between Undertaker and Kane, with the winner becoming the WWE champion. And the stipulation is that Austin, if he did not call the match down the middle, he would be fired right there on live TV. Austin, of course, refuses to play ball in this thing, ends up sabotaging the whole match. No winner is declared, and McMahon fires Austin as the show goes off the air. So still, there is no WWE champion. On Raw, in upcoming days and weeks, they announced that there would be the 16-man tournament. Of course, Austin showed back up on Raw anyway, even though he was fired, held Vince McMahon at gunpoint, and it was that fake gun with the Bang 316. McMahon went cross-eyed and pissed his pants, and then Austin put his brand new contract that Shane McMahon had signed him to in the pocket of Vince McMahon, and it turned out that Shane had turned on his dad, wound up signing Stone Cold to an ironclad 5-year deal, which of course really pissed off Vince McMahon. He ended up demoting his son Shane down to being a lowly referee, as Vince put it, and that was kind of the whole storyline. So now we had a vacant WWE title, and everybody was going to be in the WWE title tournament. Stone Cold, The Undertaker, Kane, The Rock. Undertaker and Kane would get first-round buys, much like Hogan and Andre did at WrestleMania 4. And I don't know if this was a favor by Vince McMahon or if it was just the fact that these two behemoths take so much out of each other, they should get a first-round buy because fighting each other would be the equivalent of fighting two matches. That was the reasoning they used for Hogan and Andre. Also, The Rock, who was just coming off a pretty good heel run with the Nation of Domination, Intercontinental Champion, lost the Intercontinental title to Triple H at SummerSlam, and then just kind of immediately started morphing into a babyface. Fans really were taking to him already. They already were kind of into him before when he was a heel, and now he started having some conflicts with the corporation and Vince McMahon kind of causing him to be a babyface, and the fans really took to him. So he really had kind of like a 2-month babyface run here, and you could tell he was going to be hot. Fans were into him. He is also in this tournament, as well as Stone Cold Steve Austin. So Vince McMahon basically is hell-bent on keeping Austin and Rock either out of the tournament or making sure that they don't win it. His hand-selected pick to win the whole thing is Mick Foley, of all people. This was when Vince McMahon gave Mick Foley the hardcore title, and that title was born. Mick Foley had gotten a makeover, a haircut. He was clean-shaven, had some teeth put in. He was wearing a tuxedo, wrestling in a fucking tuxedo, acting like a complete idiot, in love with Vince McMahon, giving him hugs all the time. It was ridiculous. They were making it seem like he was the guy that Vince wanted to win the title. I really didn't see how brilliant they were being here, and throughout the show they were giving you little hints as to what they were doing and revealing little bits at a time, and then when you see how the whole entire story and the whole entire plan came together at the end, it's like, wow, that was actually really well done, well thought out, and well written. So as a fan, I remember being excited for the pay-per-view because I really didn't know how it was going to end up and who was going to wind up winning the title. I actually thought that The Rock could win the title, but I wasn't expecting him to turn heel. As a matter of fact, I even think I predicted The Rock to win, but I certainly didn't predict the heel turn and him joining forces with the McMahons. That was pretty fucking crazy. But enough about the backstory and where I was at the time. Let's get into this pay-per-view. It took place from the Kiel Center in St. Louis, Missouri. November 15th, 1998 was the date. We are basically right on top of the 17-year anniversary of the show. The upload date of this video I expect to be right around the 15th. This was back when pay-per-views were cool. They used to change up the sets. It's not so generic and the same every time the way it is now. All they do is just do a Raw set and digitally place the logo for the pay-per-view up there. So I guess it's a cost-cutting measure by the WWE. But back in the day, it was fun to watch shows and to go to shows. This was during the era that I was going to a lot of Raws and a lot of pay-per-views. And I remember we would talk on the way to the show, driving to the arena, like, wow, I wonder what the set is going to look like. I don't suppose you even have those conversations anymore because the set looks the same for every fucking show. WrestleMania is the only one they really change up. But I really like this pay-per-view setup. It was this giant skull, the Deadly Game skull, and that annoying song, remember, that they kept playing over and over that I used in the intro. It had a whole theme to it, and it was a different feeling, and it definitely wasn't your traditional Survivor Series because up until this point, I don't think they ever had a Survivor Series where there was not any traditional Survivor Series matches. Timing was also an issue. I remember talking with my wrestling friends back in the day because we were such know-it-all fucking smarks. We kept saying to ourselves, a 16-man tournament crammed into 2 hours and 45 minutes of pay-per-view time by the cable company, this is going to have to be precisely timed, and there is not going to be much room for error to get all of these matches in. And a lot of them were very short, and then you throw in 1 or 2 buys, and they were able to get it all in, and I applaud the WWE for taking a chance. Remember WCW? A month before this at Halloween Havoc completely fucked over their pay-per-view audience because they didn't allow themselves enough time to get through a great main event between DDP and Goldberg, and they lost the pay-per-view feed, and I mean, it really, that really cost them a lot. So for the WWE to be like, you know what, fuck it, we're going to do a 16-man tournament, we'll show these idiots in WCW how it's done, and they timed everything perfectly, and they fit it all in, and it was probably one of the best timed and run shows I think I've ever seen. I just applaud everybody involved in that for putting that together live, and like I said, there's not much room for error. A wrestling ring rope can't break or something like that. They were going from match to match. There was not much time in between. They weren't showing 5 minutes of video packages before each match. As soon as one match ended, the next one started. So there was very, very little room for error here, and the WWE and the whole team there pulled this pay-per-view off beautifully. The show opens with your first round match, Mankind taking on a mystery opponent, and you can see I've got the bracket most likely up here on the screen for you to take a look at. This was in the beginning days of the corporation. Vince McMahon was in a wheelchair, thanks to Undertaker and Kane, who I believe smashed his ankle in the steel steps, that great spot. We've seen it several times now throughout the years, but the time Vince got it done to him was the first time we ever saw it, and they absolutely beat the crap out of Vince. So he was rolling around in one of those wheelchairs, much like we're watching Zeb Coulter do today, and he's basically selling the shattered ankle that the Brothers of Destruction had given him. So he comes rolling out there with the Stooges. I don't know if they were the Stooges yet, Gerald Briscoe and Pat Patterson. Yes, they were. They were definitely the Stooges by this point. They're out there with Sergeant Slaughter and Vince McMahon, of course, and Vince gets on the mic to announce Mick Foley's mystery partner. Mankind had already made his entrance into the ring. He looks fucking ridiculous. He's got his hair all combed in a ponytail, but he's got the mask on. He's also clean-shaven, and like I said, he's wearing a tuxedo of all things. Gives Vince McMahon a hug even on his way to the ring, and Vince kind of like winces, like, oh, get the fuck off me. So pretty funny how it's completely obvious to everybody except for Mick Foley that Vince McMahon doesn't give a fuck about him. Vince then pulls out his notes and goes on to announce this mystery opponent for Mankind, announcing all of his credentials, going into maybe a 4-minute speech about everything that this guy has accomplished and how he's a legend, even that he jumped over WCW and came back. I remember thinking to myself, wow, who the fuck is this going to be? I was actually excited about the mystery opponent, and in a way I can look at the mystery opponent being a letdown, but in a way I don't think it's a letdown because it tied into the storyline so perfectly. But, I mean, the fans were chanting Shawn Michaels, we were thinking Ric Flair. There was a lot of people that the wrestling dirt sheets were, speculating and hinting to rumors as who it could be, as who Mick Foley's mystery opponent could be. So after Vince McMahon goes through this long, drawn-out speech to build up this mystery opponent for Mankind, he announces Dwayne Gill, a longtime jobber in the WWE. I wouldn't even be surprised. I don't know. Some of you could look this up for me. I wouldn't be surprised if Mick Foley and Dwayne Gill tag teamed together once or twice when they were both jobbers in the 80s. Dwayne Gill was a horrible-looking, half-balding, long, bleached, blonde-haired jobber in the WWE. Had no physique whatsoever, but he gave guys, good matches and could take the right bumps, and he had a pretty long career as a jobber in professional wrestling. So him to return here, and the fans kind of got such a kick out of him, he ended up getting a contract. He won the light heavyweight title, joined the Job Squad, and then he became Gilbert and all that shit, remember? So this was his first appearance back in the WWE, basically used as a joke. He comes walking out there in a ridiculous-looking outfit, and then he had some pyro go off, and it scared the shit out of him and almost gave him a heart attack. And he gets in the ring, and Mankind beats him in like 10 seconds. So just adding to the storyline that Vince McMahon is trying to give Mankind a free ride right to the WWE title. After this match, they briefly go backstage for an interview with Sable, who got injured on Sunday Night Heat, or on the pre-show, by Jacqueline, who hit her in the back with the WWE Women's title. Sable was getting the title shot against Jackie later on that night. Mark Marrow had, of course, split from Sable and has now aligned himself with Jackie. And they showed the replay of the incident from Sunday Night Heat, and Sable said she's pissed off and is going to kick Jackie's ass, and she's going to take the WWE Women's title. Blah, blah, blah. Fuck off, Sable. Next up, another first-round tournament match between Al Snow and Jeff Jarrett. Not a very good match. Only went about 4 minutes. Spots were loose and botchy, and the whole match really looked fucking terrible. But Jeff Jarrett's guitar and Al Snow's head both made an appearance in this match. The guitar got taken away by the referee. Jeff Jarrett tried to hit Al Snow with head. Al Snow counters, grabs head, and wallops Jeff Jarrett with it, and getting the pin, and Al Snow advances to the next round to face Mankind. Stone Cold's match was up next. He was taking on the recently returned Big Boss Man to the WWE. When he came back a couple of months before this, I thought it was awesome. In WCW, he was practically invisible. You did not even know he was there. He was just another one of those members thrown into the NWO to completely dilute it and fuck up the angle. You didn't even notice he was even really in the company. And now he comes back to the WWE with a pretty significant role, being a henchman of Vince McMahon. He's out there to face Stone Cold, a hand-picked opponent by Vince McMahon, no doubt, and they were making reference to that Boss Man's really probably not out there to win the match. He's out there more to injure and maim Stone Cold and to ensure that there's no way he's going to be able to advance and continue in the WWE title tournament. So as the match goes on for a few minutes, it's a lot of brawling, of course, as you would expect from Austin and Traylor. They go out to the ring. Boss Man grabs the nightstick and just hits Austin, gets himself intentionally disqualified, and just continues to beat the crap out of Austin with the nightstick. recreating the Brother Love show when he beat the crap out of Hogan in 1998. Just completely destroyed Austin with that nightstick. And, of course, Austin sells the injuries. The announcers are wondering if he's going to even be able to compete in the next round. They even go backstage to an interview with Vince McMahon. I think Michael Cole comes up to him and the Stooges and Slaughter and says, are you pissed off about Austin advancing in the tournament? And Vince is like, hell no. Does it look like I'm concerned? Do you see Austin right now? He can't even walk. Yeah, he might have won the match, but I'm not too concerned with this guy being much of a threat to my master plan of having Mankind win the WWE title. The next first round match was kind of an interesting one. It's still a match that I look back on to this day, and I'm not really 100% sure what truly happened. X-Pac is taking on Steven Regal, who had just recently come into the WWE. This was when he was that hilarious man's man gimmick and that ridiculous theme song that still gets played a time or two now just for a laugh. Pretty funny stuff. I think if Regal had his shit together, he could have made this goofy character work because he was, goofy when he came back as William Regal, the sophisticated guy that he was. He was still pretty funny, and this man's man gimmick was so ridiculous, but Regal was probably just good enough to make it work, but he did not last long. He had a lot of drug issues around this time. I actually don't even think he appeared again after Survivor Series. I think he had gotten let go and went back to WCW after he had left there under weird circumstances. I think part of the reason why he left WCW is he got in a little bit of trouble for, going through a half shoot on Goldberg during a Nitro match. And he didn't really shoot on Goldberg. He was just trying to give him a competitive match, but it pissed some people off in WCW management because he's supposed to go out there and let Goldberg demolish him, and he really didn't want to do that and wanted to give this guy some competition. Everybody mistook that as he was shooting on him or something like that, but he wasn't. So anyway, he left WCW under pretty bad circumstances, and plus he had a lot of drug problems while he was there, came to the WWE, had not had himself cleaned up. I think the WWE let him go, told him to go to rehab, do whatever you want to do. The door's open for you to return one day in the future. So he went back to WCW, I believe, for a really short time, and then sooner or later he was back in the WWE, I think by 2000 or 2001. But anyway, he takes on X-Pac in this match, who's right in the middle of his DX run. He's European champion. X-Pac is on fire. One of my favorite wrestlers during the Attitude Era. I thought he was so good. He had his issues and his personal demons as well, and he could be a real tool bag from what I understand from a lot of people. But I still just have a lot of respect for X-Pac. Yeah, he's lived a pretty wild life, but he's pretty down to earth when you hear him talk, and I think he's relatively humble. He certainly doesn't have an ego, and he seems more like a regular guy, somebody that I could sit around and have a beer with. I like guys like X-Pac, guys like Rob Van Dam, guys like CM Punk, just some guys that seem a little bit more like myself. And so even though I don't agree with everything X-Pac has done in his career, I really I've always liked X-Pac. He's always been one of my favorites, and I really liked him around this time, 1998, right in the middle of his run with DX. Had his own personalized, custom DX theme song that he would come out to that was different from the other guys. I just really liked him, and he was so fucking good in the ring. But this match was interesting because I can't tell if what happened was a shoot or a botch or something went wrong. Basically, they have a small, semi-competitive match. Doesn't last very long, but X-Pac takes a couple of bumps, lands on his neck once or twice. As a matter of fact, I think Regal even superplexes him into the ring at one point, and he screams out, "Shit!" You can hear him yell right there on the pay-per-view broadcast. I'm curious if it's edited out on the WWE Network. But you could tell that he seemed like he hurt his neck or whatever. So anyway, the match ends in a double countout because they're brawling outside of the ring. So the referee rings the bell. Vince McMahon sends Sergeant Slaughter out there and orders the match to be restarted because the winner of this match is supposed to face Stone Cold Steve Austin. And of course, evil Vince McMahon does not want that to happen. So he starts making up the rules as he goes along. Slaughter goes out there to announce that the match is going to go into overtime, a 5-minute sudden death overtime period to determine the winner. But by this point, the referees had already started attending to X-Pac, and he was walking back to the ring. He was already halfway down the aisle holding his neck. He seemed legitimately hurt. Sergeant Slaughter even has the timekeeper ring the bell to start the match, but X-Pac is almost like, fuck you, I'm not coming back, I'm hurt. And so I think he was actually really hurt, and Austin got away with a bye. And to this day, I don't know if there was supposed to be a winner in that, because why would they send out Slaughter to announce an overtime period just to not do it? So it seemed like something got fucked up and X-Pac actually got hurt. I don't recall him missing any time back then. I'm pretty sure he was still on the road and really wasn't off TV for any significant time back in 1998. 1998. Just a few months later, he'd have that great match with Shane McMahon at WrestleMania 15. I was at that show. You would think for storyline purposes, they would want to line opponents up for Austin. And I also think it would have been cool just for a longtime wrestling fan like myself to see stunning Steve Austin versus Lord Steven Regal in the WWE. Austin and Regal go way back from WCW, so for those guys to have a match in WWE during the Attitude Era, I would have liked to see that. So I would have liked to see them figure out some way to have Regal advance. You could tell just how in a hurry WWE was with all of this, because as weird as that match was and as awkward as the finish was, with everybody kind of standing around not knowing what's going on, after it's done, William Regal gets out of the ring and literally sprints to the backstage area. He runs down the aisle, and he's not even through the curtain yet, and you hear Ken Shamrock's music start playing. So they're going right from match to match to match here, and just to watch him running to the back like, oh shit, I better get out of the way, the next match is about to start, was pretty funny. So Shamrock comes out next for his first round match against Goldust. Not much to say about this match. Finally, a match with no weird shit going on. Shamrock actually just locks Goldust in the ankle lock right in the middle of the ring, and Goldust taps out, so Shamrock advances. In another match with a great twist and turn and all ties into the storyline in the end, The Rock's first round opponent is supposed to be Triple H. But as you remember, right after he beat The Rock for the Intercontinental title at SummerSlam, he basically didn't even have an Intercontinental title run. He had to forfeit the title because he had a knee injury. They ended up having an Intercontinental title tournament that Ken Shamrock won. He was the current Intercontinental champion during the show. And Triple H was supposed to be on the shelf for a couple of months, but they were thinking he would make it back in time for Survivor Series. And now The Rock is also a babyface. So you've got a very interesting babyface match between two longtime rivals, The Rock and Triple H. There hasn't been many times throughout WWE's history that The Rock and Triple H have both been babyfaces at the same time. And I thought this was going to be a really intriguing match, but you knew the dirt sheets were reporting and the rumors during this time. We all knew that Triple H wasn't going to make it. So, for us, we were thinking there was going to be two mystery opponents. The Rock comes out to get ready for his match, and instead of Triple H, the DX music starts playing, but it's the fucking Stooges, and they're doing the crotch chops and all that shit, and it was so funny. And Gerald Briscoe. Holy shit. Every time he says Mr. McMahon, I piss my pants. So he gets on the mic, he says Mr. McMahon about 5,000 times during this promo, talks about Triple H and how disappointed Mr. McMahon is in Triple H, and Mr. McMahon told me that I have the right to fine Triple H a huge sum of money for not showing up, and Mr. McMahon has informed me that I have to inform you that The Rock has a new opponent hand-selected by Mr. McMahon, and that opponent is the Big Boss Man. So Boss Man, who already lost his first round match against Stone Cold, is now coming out there to face The Rock. And in a brilliant move, it's like, Boss Man runs into the ring, The Rock immediately grabs him, the bell rings, he rolls him up in a small package and beats the Big Boss Man in 4 seconds. And I remember watching that laughing like, yeah, fuck you, corporation. Yeah, fuck you, Vince McMahon. But it was all a fucking ruse. Just so brilliantly done. So The Rock rolls up Boss Man, pinning him in 4 seconds, surprising the hell out of Vince McMahon and his stooges. They're thinking they're fucked. The Rock just won his match with virtually doing no work at all. Boss Man is livid and pissed off, and he's going to the back. And even the announcers are like, oh my God, the Boss Man is going to get in so much trouble. And the Boss Man wasn't done yet. So that does it for the first round of the tournament. On to the second round now. The first match we get is Undertaker versus Kane, who of course both got buys in the first round. WWE had also made a lot of changes to this storyline in the recent months. Kane, of course, now was babyface, and Undertaker was a heel. After Kane came into the WWE 1 year earlier and did everything he could to destroy The Undertaker, it turns out that Paul Bearer is Kane's father. This came to light, I think, during the summer of '98. Undertaker and Paul Bearer abandoned Kane and put him in a home or some shit like that. And of course there was the fire that Undertaker apparently started. Undertaker was the murderer in the family apparently. He's the one that actually killed the parents. Paul Bearer turns out to be Kane's father, so I guess Taker and Kane are really half-brothers, not brothers. And the whole thing, looking back, is kind of silly because they went in a complete 180. After Paul Bearer had turned on The Undertaker and Kane did everything he could to destroy him, was so evil, now the tables have turned and Undertaker and Paul Bearer have rejoined forces. They're evil, going up against babyface Kane. So anyway, these two behemoths have a pretty hard-hitting one-on-one match like the Brothers of Destruction typically have. Very simple, old-school finish where Kane has Undertaker in a compromising spot. Paul Bearer jumps up on the apron, distracting Kane. Undertaker comes from behind, scoops him up in the tombstone, hits him with a tombstone, pins him for the 1-2-3 with the help of Paul Bearer, who's also holding the leg down of Kane. So Kane goes down with one tombstone and a little bit of help from Paul Bearer. Things are moving fast as always, and Mick Foley and Al Snow come out for their second round match next. There's also a whole little separate storyline in this angle. I mean, every match seems like it had something else going on, and that's what a lot of people talk about today when you look back at the product during this time, is that everybody had a storyline or had something going on. So unlike today. But on top of everything else that Mick Foley had going on with Vince McMahon and the hardcore title and being the hand-selected guy to be the next WWE champion and the tuxedo and his change of attitude and his change of look, it still didn't change the fact that he was completely batshit crazy and he loved Mr. Sacco. So one of the things Vince McMahon did to fuck with Mankind was to take Mr. Sacco, steal it from him. He had been looking for it on TV for the last couple of weeks, which was pretty funny. Vince apparently had Sacco taken and wrapped around Al Snow's head like a headband. This was set up seemingly by Vince McMahon so that when Mick Foley saw Sacco, who he hadn't seen in so long, wrapped around Al Snow's head during their match, it was going to set him off like a grenade and he was going to go apeshit on Al Snow and beat the fuck out of him. That's pretty much what happened. Head, of course, made his way in the ring. Mick Foley gets a look at it, sees that Sacco's wrapped around it, takes the sock off, puts it on his hand, and nails Al Snow with the mandible claw and wins the match. So pretty weird, but pretty funny, and it's just what professional wrestling is. I got a kick out of this match. One of the funniest parts in the whole thing is after Mick Foley takes Sacco off, he's pissed off at Head. He starts beating the shit out of Head. He was stomping it on the mat, and then he grabs it, puts it in a headlock, and starts punching its face. Too fucking funny. This pay-per-view was extremely entertaining to me. I just got such a kick out of this when I went back and watched it. In another brilliant part of this storyline, the next second-round match up is The Rock versus Ken Shamrock. Now, what's interesting about this is these two guys had also had a pretty storied rivalry. Ken Shamrock had pretty much owned The Rock up until this point. As a matter of fact, the Survivor Series 1 year prior to this, the 1997 one, of course, the Montreal Screwjob show, it was like Rock's team versus Shamrock's team. It was Nation versus Shamrock and a bunch of guys or whatever, and Shamrock was completely dominant. He was also dominant over The Rock at WrestleMania. They might have even worked Royal Rumble, I forget, but these guys had worked a lot, and Shamrock had been kicking his ass. Now, the finish to this match was awesome. It was pulled off to perfection. The Rock and Ken Shamrock and the Big Boss Man deserve a ton of credit for the way they pulled off this finish. This was another brilliant part of the storyline that they were kind of fooling the fans here. Big Boss Man comes out seemingly to help Ken Shamrock. They're both standing in the middle of the ring. Boss Man gets up on the apron to distract the referee. As the referee turns around, he tosses the nightstick to Shamrock, but The Rock intercepts it. And it was just so perfectly thrown. Boss Man lobbed that nightstick right up in the air. Ken Shamrock goes for it. The Rock reaches out his long arms, snags it out of midair, catches it perfectly in his hand, and nails Ken Shamrock right in the face with it. And in one full motion, tosses the nightstick back out to the ring. Boss Man catches it right in his hand, gets down, and gets the pin on Ken Shamrock. Boss Man, of course, acts pissed off, goes to the back. The announcers, Jerry Lawler and Jim Ross, are like, holy shit, he is going to get his ass chewed out. He is in so much hot water with Vince McMahon right now. This is the second time he's screwed up, and you think the poor guy is going to be fired. But the way they pulled that off, it could not have gone better. The way they had to make it look like Boss Man was actually tossing the nightstick into Shamrock. They also had to make it look like The Rock was snagging it out of midair, and it was just so perfectly done. It looked real. And it looked like Boss Man legitimately fucked up. And then when you take into account the whole thing was in storyline just to work to fool the fans into thinking that Vince did not want The Rock to be WWE champion, when you take all of that into account, this was my favorite finish of any match on the show. It literally could not have gone better. So The Rock advances to face The Undertaker in the semifinal round. We get a small breather from tournament matches next. They finally get to the WWE Women's title match between champion Jackie and Sable. Now, you guys know I've never been a big Sable fan, really never had a whole lot of respect for her at all. Jackie, on the other hand, I loved her. I remember her back during her Miss Texas days in USWA. She is a million times better wrestler than Sable, but of course Sable was the big star, the big playboy playmate. I think the whole reason why they resurrected the women's title to begin with was just to give it to Sable. And this match, of course, was filled with all the silly, goofy spots going on during the split of Marc Mero and Sable. Marc Mero, of course, was now aligned Mankind with Jacqueline, and they had done this once or twice before, several times on TV at least, but Sable, they would do the spot on the outside of the ring where Sable would powerbomb Mark Marrow. I'm pretty sure she powerbombed him at WrestleMania. She powerbombed him once or twice a couple of other times, so during this match, he interrupts a 3 count, drags her outside of the ring to stop her from pinning Jacqueline. She gets pissed off, kicks Mark Marrow right in the nuts, and powerbombs him on the outside of the ring. It's just so ridiculous because it looks so, Mark Marrow really has to cooperate. This 110-pound chick cannot lift up this 230-pound wrestler like that, so he's got to jump. It actually doesn't really look very good, and Sable's not even strong. She's just a little woman. It's one thing if you had Chyna doing this or something like that, but this was so ridiculous. I never liked the spot because it was so absurd of a spot, and they constantly did it over and over and over again, and I thought it was just ridiculous, and I thought it was a terrible way of showing casual fans or maybe critics of the wrestling business how truly fucking fake this shit can be sometimes. So I just never was a fan of that. But after she gets done powerbombing someone 3 times bigger than her, she ends up getting in the ring, fighting with Jacqueline a little bit more, ends up hitting her with the Sable Bomb as well, gets the pin and becomes the new WWE Women's Champion. Big fucking deal. A champion with no challenger. She was a whiny, bitchy pain in the ass all the way up until WrestleMania 15, and then she was gone shortly after that, and the bitch showed up on Nitro. Remember that? Anyway, not a fan of Sable at all. Brock Lesnar, I hope you're not listening. Incidentally, there was an interesting referee in that match, too. It was Shane McMahon. Now, I mentioned earlier how Shane got demoted by his father after he signed Stone Cold Steve Austin after he was fired to a new WWE contract. Vince McMahon demoted Shane to being a lowly referee. So in a great example of how WWE really paid attention to detail back then, they had Shane make an appearance as a referee in this match right before the Stone Cold Mankind semifinal match. So that match kicks off next. Mankind and Austin both make their way out to the ring. They have, of course, a typical Mick Foley and Stone Cold-like brawl. Very lax on the rules in this match as well. And here's another instance where WWE just kept the storyline wheels turning. We saw 2 major bombshells drop in this match. Vince McMahon once again wheels his ass out there in that wheelchair with the Stooges and Sergeant Slaughter. He's at ringside watching the brawl, instructing the referee not to disqualify anybody. Mick Foley, or Mankind, is using the chair left and right. There's a lot of brawling outside of the ring. No one's getting counted out. No one's getting DQ'd. Vince McMahon just wants to let him fight. Austin finally gets Mankind back in the ring, hits him with the Stone Cold Stunner, and just as the referee's about to count 3, Vince McMahon leaps up from his wheelchair, dives into the ring, pulls the referee out, ends up beating the hell out of him, running around on his leg as if nothing's wrong. So he was fooling all of us, and he stayed in that wheelchair a lot longer than he needed to. Kane and Undertaker had broken his leg or ankle after the Breakdown pay-per-view a couple of months before, so he had been in this wheelchair for about 7 or 8 weeks on TV. Ends up jumping out of the wheelchair, revealing that he's not hurt at all. So that's bombshell number 1, but that still is not enough to stop Stone Cold Steve Austin. He eventually hits Mankind with another Stone Cold Stunner. This time, since there's no referee because Vince McMahon beat him up, here comes Wonder Boy Shane McMahon, who WWE just got done reminding us that he's a referee for this show. And incidentally, it just fucking dawned on me, quick little side note, the next pay-per-view review that I'm going to release here in just a couple of days, Shane McMahon is also a referee in that pay-per-view. Very strange. But anyway, Shane runs into the ring. The fans go nuts because they're assuming that he's going to count down Mick Foley and Austin's going to win. He hits the 1, he hits the 2, and then he stops, does not count Mankind out, ends up looking right at Austin and shoots him the double bird, turning heel and screwing Stone Cold Steve Austin out of his victory and a chance to wrestle for the WWE title. So that's bombshell number 2. Shane McMahon turns heel about 3 minutes after his father shocks the world by jumping out of the wheelchair, revealing that he's not even injured. The two of them are now back together, and unfortunately, I think they screwed something up. Somebody missed their cue or something here. This was a really bad finish to the match. I actually didn't like it. Once Austin realizes that he's been screwed by Shane McMahon, he kind of keeps talking with Shane a little bit too long. He's, staring at him through the ropes as Shane is cowardly running away on the outside of the ring, but they're still talking with each other. It's almost as if Austin is waiting for someone to attack him, but Mankind is laid out in the middle of the ring. No one's doing anything. Finally, I think it's Briscoe and Slaughter end up getting in the ring. Slaughter holds and pins down Stone Cold's arms, and Jerry Briscoe hits him with a terrible chair shot. Austin put his hands way up in the air, and plus Briscoe was really light on the chair shot as well, barely even touched Austin. Austin goes down, Mankind gets the pin, and ends up advancing to the finals of the WWE title tournament, and Austin got completely fucked over. But the finish was really bad, because when you think about what a badass Stone Cold Steve Austin was, what a tough-ass character he was, nobody could bring this guy down. He's going to lose because of a weak-ass chair shot by a 65-year-old man. I didn't like the finish at all. I thought they could have booked it a lot better. But still, what a ride. What a story. This whole thing is starting to play out right before our eyes. This grand master plan by the McMahons that truly, I believe, fooled and shocked the entire wrestling world. And one of the best parts, I think, of this match, and it's too funny to even talk about, you got to go back on the WWE Network or something and watch this, but when the match is over and Austin gets screwed, you know how Mankind had different entrance musics? You know, his entrance would play one song, and then when he won a match, you know, him leaving the ring, he would leave to that piano music or whatever the fuck. So that music, of course, is playing, and the McMahons and the Stooges and Sergeant Slaughter and Bossman and everybody are running through the backstage area knowing that Stone Cold's going to be pissed and is going to be after their ass. They start running to the back to leave, and as they're running through the backstage area, the camera's showing them running, but you're also hearing the silly-ass Mankind piano music, and the two of them going together was, I don't know, it's just something that just cracked me up. I laughed my ass off when I saw it. Go back and watch it. You'll see what I'm talking about. Vince McMahon and Shane both have these stupid little grins on their face, and they're jogging at the same time, and Mankind's music is playing. It's just too funny to put into words. But I was in my house all by myself watching this pay-per-view, taking down these notes, and I was literally laughing out loud. It was fucking hilarious. They finally do make it to their limo just as Austin is chasing them down, and he's just a little bit too late. The limo takes off, but then Austin doesn't stop there. He goes and carjacks someone, just pulls this guy right out of this truck, just throws him right out of the fucking truck, gets behind the wheel, and drives off after the McMahons, complete in his black trunks and black boots and sweaty, shirtless body. He's going to drive down the fucking interstate going after these guys. So they gave you the impression, and yet another twist, that the McMahons were gone. They were gone for the night. They were definitely not going to go back to the arena knowing that Stone Cold is hunting them down, so they're gone. They made you think that you wouldn't see the rest of the McMahons or the Stooges or Slaughter or Bossman or anyone for the rest of the night. The other semifinal match is up next, and this, of course, is The Rock versus The Undertaker. This match was okay. It went about 10 minutes, and in another great, well-thought-out finish, of course, we know the heat between Undertaker and Kane. Kane got screwed over in his match with Undertaker earlier on in the night, so he comes out to get revenge. Shows right up, gets right in the middle of the ring, right during the match, and Undertaker throws The Rock at him. Undertaker had Rock in a chokeslam position, ended up throwing him at Kane. Kane lifts The Rock up and chokeslams him, and I think the fans were like, what the fuck? But Kane just went in there to chokeslam The Rock to get his brother disqualified. It was actually kind of a funny finish. Undertaker even looks around like, what the fuck? Oh, damn it. And then they start brawling with each other, and the Brothers of Destruction brawl right into the crowd and completely out of the arena. So The Rock now advances. It's going to be The Rock versus Mankind for the WWE title. We need a breather after that, so they give us a filler match. This is actually a triple threat match for the WWE Tag Team titles. Champions, New Age Outlaws, taking on challengers, Headbangers, and Mark Henry and D'Lo Brown. Pretty bad match. I think these guys really weren't into it. They knew the bigger story was the tournament. No reason to go out there and bust your ass in a really meaningless match like this that we all expected the Outlaws to win. It wasn't even an exciting finish either. Billy Gunn just hit one of the Headbangers with a pile driver and pinned him. That was it. So New Age Outlaws did retain the tag team titles. Now on to the main event. WWE title tournament finals. Rock versus Mankind for all the marbles for the WWE title belt. It looks like the McMahons are gone. It's going to be a one-on-one match between The Rock and Mankind. And then all of a sudden, as The Rock's entrance music is playing and he's coming out to the ring, they show Vince and Shane back at the arena. They had driven back. They're back in the parking garage talking to the big boss man and sending him away and saying, okay, we don't need you for this. We want to handle it personally. Have a good night. Watch out for Austin. He's driving around there like a crazy man on the interstate somewhere. Have a good night. We'll see you tomorrow. So you're like, oh, fuck, the McMahons are back. And it's so funny, like, looking back, I was a pretty smart wrestling fan back then. And I even, was following backstage news and stuff. And I was a pretty knowledgeable little fucking smart back then. And even I really didn't see this coming. I didn't even think that they would turn The Rock heel. I mean, maybe I did. I think I did, like I said earlier, predict him to win the tournament, if I remember correctly, but I just didn't see this big elaborate ruse taking place, and I was actually a little bit stunned by it. And just looking back now, how well it was all put together and how it all culminated in this match was pretty amazing. I would love it if they would do something like this again today. So about halfway through this Rock and Mankind brawl, of course, Vince and Shane make their way out to the ring. Vince is walking perfectly. They both got two shit-eating grins on their face. They come out to sit ringside during this match, and again, there's a whole lot of leeway given to these wrestlers. They're using chairs. They're on the outside of the ring. There's table spots. There's all sorts of shit going on. Vince McMahon is not letting Earl Hebner ring the bell. And finally, as both men are down, laid out in the middle of the ring, The Rock gets up, turns his head around, looks right at Vince McMahon, raises the people's eyebrow at Vince. Vince raises his eyebrow back at The Rock. He picks up Mankind, puts him in the sharpshooter, and Vince McMahon calls for the bell to ring. The 1-year anniversary of the screw job, Vince McMahon does it again, and he even I remember Wrestling with Shadows was just about to be released. It was coming out like a week or two after this, and I think it was like Vince McMahon's little one-up to Bret Hart's documentary, because he knew Bret's documentary was going to be very revealing and it was going to expose WWE for some of the fucked up shit they did, so he almost wanted to one-up Bret Hart and went ahead with doing another screw job angle, a year later at the next Survivor Series, and pulls this whole thing off. I mean, the way Earl Hebner was in the ring, the way the sharpshooter was involved, the way Vince was instructing the timekeeper to ring the bell, I thought it was all just a really nice tie-in. Not only did it acknowledge what transpired a year before, Bret and Vince's relationship was also not very good with Wrestling with Shadows about to be released, so Vince kind of wanted to one-up him there. And then you take the great storyline internally in the WWE that's regarding their own wrestlers and their own talent, and it was just so beautifully and wonderfully put together, and it was a really well done swerve where a lot of fans fell for it. The Rock had just turned babyface. You didn't expect him to turn heel that quickly. It was almost like a little 6 or 7 week deal, and then he was right back to being a heel, but instead of the Nation, he's got the McMahons. They literally created and launched a main event player that night. Because when you think about it, that was rather early for The Rock to win. I remember my only reservations about The Rock winning the title. I was a big Rock fan back then, but I personally did not think he was ready. He only debuted 2 years before that at the 1996 Survivor Series, and he was out about 7 or 8 months in between with a knee injury, and then he came back as a heel and joined the Nation. So he had only really been wrestling on the main roster for less than a year and a half, and they put the WWE title on him during the hottest time in the company's history. To me, when I look back on that, that's the more remarkable thing, is how young and how new The Rock was to the business. If this happened now, the fans might shit themselves because they think the guy doesn't deserve it or didn't earn it or something like that, So the fans are so picky now. But when you think about how guys were launched so early in their careers back in the day, to me, when you complain about Roman Reigns, oh, he's getting it too quickly. Bullshit. He's been around for a few years. He's been around twice as long as The Rock. And The Rock got his big opportunity really early in his career. But I loved it. I loved what they did that night. The Rock was a major player and a household name pretty much from that moment on. And his heel run didn't even last very long. He was so charismatic. He was so good. The fans really didn't want to hate him. So he was a heel just until right after WrestleMania. They did the long program. That whole Survivor Series tournament was done to set up the main event they wanted to go with at WrestleMania between The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin. And speaking of Stone Cold Steve Austin and his feud with The Rock, if I had one complaint about this pay-per-view, it's that they just tried to do a little bit too much, because after the match, after the McMahons and The Rock got done screwing the fans and Mankind, Vince McMahon goes on to cut a promo to talk about how he fooled everybody and how he's some grand genius. You also had The Rock say a few words to the fans, let them know how he felt about them. Poor Mankind is standing there all confused, not sure what's going on. He's pacing around the ring, finally gets on the mic and says, "Dad," which is what he was calling Vince McMahon, "will you please explain to me what the hell's going on?" And Vince is like, "You still don't get it, do you? Well, maybe you'll get this." And then The Rock nails Mankind from behind with the belt, beats the crap out of him. So basically, you had another turn. This was one of those very few and very, very rare double turn matches where The Rock became a heel and Mankind became a babyface. They tried to keep Mankind getting sympathy throughout the entire show, really illustrating how Vince McMahon was, just using him and toying with the guy. So if you read the writing on the wall, you could have almost seen this finish coming, but I was completely taken off guard by it. And you also had Austin, which was another minor complaint of mine, coming out at the very end to beat the shit out of The Rock. He shows back up at the arena, comes down to the ring, runs down there to interrupt the big celebration, beats the shit out of The Rock, throws him over the top rope, throws the belt down on top of him, and the show closes with Stone Cold Steve Austin's music playing. If you ask me, the WWE just did a little bit too much. We already had such an incredible ride. We already had Shane McMahon turn heel. We already had The Rock turn heel. We already had Mankind turn face. We had Vince McMahon surprising everybody by leaping out of his wheelchair. You had the boss man, who we all thought was fucking up throughout the entire show, was really doing all that shit on purpose to help Vince McMahon's master plan. If you ask me, they could have just ended the show right there with The Rock celebrating with the McMahons, and the show goes off the air. They could have explained everything on Monday Night Raw, because if you think about it, they had a lot of time to kill before they got to WrestleMania with Stone Cold and The Rock. That's why they took that little detour on the side and had the feud with Mankind and The Rock, and Mankind ended up winning the WWE title in the beginning of the year. But even with that, they still had a ton of time. So I think Survivor Series should have gone off the air with the fans wondering what the fuck they saw. Then the next night on Monday Night Raw, Vince, Shane, and The Rock can open up the show and explain themselves, and then Austin can make his appearance. So it's a pretty silly complaint to have, but if there was one, it was just they tried to give us too much. They were being so generous that we were already worn out by the time The Rock won the title. We didn't need 2 more promos and then a beatdown of Mankind and then a run-in by Stone Cold Steve Austin. The show could have just ended with The Rock's music playing and the fans scratching their heads. So all in all, great pay-per-view. I look back at this show with fond memories because it was so fun. That was an incredible ride when you watch it from beginning to end, and when you think about if you were around or you were old enough to remember this show at the time, like I most certainly was. I remember what was going on in wrestling that time. I remember the storylines in the WWE and WCW, and just to see that whole story play out, it was almost as if you were watching a small miniature movie. It kind of had a beginning, a middle, and an end, and there was twists and turns along the way, and then it all came together at the end. It was just a brilliantly well-written pay-per-view, well thought out, well done, and a great way to put The Rock on the map as a major player in the WWE and in professional wrestling, because WWE was still locked in a big war with WCW. Now they got another guy. They already have Stone Cold Steve Austin, who's white hot. Now they got another huge star in the making here. You knew The Rock was going to be huge in this business, heel or babyface, it didn't matter. He was a player now, and he was every bit as significant as anybody the WCW had on their roster, and he'd only been in the WWE for 2 years. There's the old saying of so-and-so was given the ball and he ran with it. There has never been a better illustration of that than what we saw with The Rock back then, because they put this relatively green wrestler right in the spotlight, right in the limelight, in front of millions of people with high television ratings, high attendance. WWE was on fire. And to put this young guy right on the front lines, he could have easily crumbled and failed. But he didn't. He succeeded and became bigger than we ever imagined he would. Look at what The Rock is doing today. Unbelievable when you look back at this show and how he started to where he is now. Quite the success story. I am a mega fan of The Rock. If you guys want to hear me talk more about The Rock, by the way, I did review his DVD documentary about a year ago or so. I talk about his entire career, so I'll put the link up on the screen or in the description or something, or check my YouTube channel. You'll find it if you want to hear me suck The Rock's dick a little bit more. Just a huge fan of his, absolutely love him, very proud of him, and look back on this show 17 years ago with great fondness and great memories. So that is it for this edition. Volume 17 of my pay-per-view and DVD reviews will be up in just a few days. It will be another Survivor Series. And I think if you think really hard, you can probably guess which one it is. I tried to pick Survivor Series that are significant to the current one that's on the horizon here in 2015. And given the fact that this Survivor Series kind of revolves around 2 things, I thought my 2 pay-per-views should have those 2 things in common. So one was Deadly Game, and if you think real hard, I'm sure you can come up with the other one and figure out which Survivor Series it is that I'm talking about. And I did drop a hint earlier, Shane McMahon was a referee in this thing. So give it some thought, you'll probably figure it out, and that review will be up in just a few days. Thanks again for cruising down memory lane with me. It's always fun. I will talk to you very soon. Until next time, peace.